Since 1945, the United States has attempted to overthrow 50 governments, many of them democracies. In the process, 30 countries have been attacked and bombed, causing the loss of countless lives. In my lifetime, the following countries in Latin America have been assaulted by the United States, directly and indirectly. Their governments replaced by dictators and other pro-Washington leaders. One of the first to be attacked was Guatemala, one of the small countries of Central America, known dismissively as banana republics.
This is Guatemala City as seen from the air. People who live in the city dress very much like the people in our own southern states. There are many churches and people go to church regularly. They speak Spanish, of course, as most of them are of Spanish descent.
In fact, most of the people of Guatemala are not of Spanish descent. They're indigenous Mayan people and very poor. In the 1950s, 2% of the population of Guatemala control the natural wealth in collusion with giant US corporations like the United Fruit Company, which dominated banana growing. On the board of United Fruit was John Foster Dulles, who happened to be US Secretary of State. His brother Alan happened to run the CIA. Both were Christian fundamentalists who regarded any opposition as the work of communism and the devil. In 1950, this man, Jacobo Arbenz, became the first Guatemalan leader to be democratically elected by a majority of his people, who saw in him the hope of social justice. He was the Hugo Chavez of his day.
What was going on in Guatemala is that there was a democratically elected president in 1950, Jacobo Arbenz, who sought to institute a series of New Deal-style reforms in which the state had a greater role in both developing the economy and redistributing wealth. And the centerpiece of that was a land reform.
Arbenz was far from radical. His land reform policies were modest. But Washington was having none of it. Howard Hunt was then working for Alan Dulles' CIA.
So they said a decision has been made at the highest levels of our government to rid Guatemala of the Arbenz regime, and we would like you to participate in it. You will be the chief of propaganda and political action.
In Guatemala, what the CIA did was mobilize every facet of American power. It didn't just isolate Guatemala militarily and diplomatically, but it used the techniques of social psychology in a nearly year-long campaign which created a sense of crisis in Guatemala.
What we wanted to do was have a terror campaign to terrify Arbenz particularly, terrify his troops, much as the German Stuka bombers terrified the population of Holland, Belgium, and Poland at the onset of World War II.
And that's what they did, so that the United States could control the economy of Guatemala, destroying the dreams of its people.
We sowed confusion through the countryside. And of course, by this time, we had aircraft flying over and dropping leaflets and doing a little harmless bombing.
A little harmless bombing and a CIA terror campaign cost thousands of lives. Arbenz, the Democrat now branded a communist, was humiliated, stripped naked, and photographed before being forced into exile. Richard Nixon, then Vice President of the United States, flew in to congratulate the new dictators.
That Guatemala is going to enter a new era in which there will be prosperity for the people together with liberty for the people.
General Rios Montt was to be one of Washington's faces of liberty. During his time as president in the 1980s, thousands of people were murdered by death squads, most of them indigenous men, women, and children. His guns and helicopters came from the United States. President Reagan flew in to warmly endorse the general, whom he described as a man of great personal integrity.
In the CIA, we didn't give a hoot about democracy. I mean, it was fine if a government was elected and would cooperate with us, but if it didn't, then democracy didn't mean a thing to us. And I don't think it means a thing today.
The crushing of Guatemala was Washington's blueprint. 4 years later, Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida, threw down the first direct challenge, ending Cuba's humiliation as a North American colony, a playpen for drug barons and the mafia.
Se han encontrado con que la revolución cubana sabe también pelear y ganar batallas en este campo.
Washington would never forgive Fidel Castro.
Under the government aegis, we had task forces that were striking at Cuba constantly. We were attempting to blow up power plants. We were attempting to ruin sugar mills. We were attempting to do all kinds of things during this period. This was a matter of American government policy. This wasn't the CIA.
Cuba's achievements in healthcare and education are widely respected. However, for not bowing to the greatest power on earth, the Cuban Revolution has paid a high price. A 45-year economic war waged by the United States and the loss of vital democratic freedoms. What justified the attacks on Cuba and other Latin American countries was the so-called Red Menace.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it. First, you duck, and then you cover. And very tightly, you cover the back of your neck and your face.
Propaganda like this excused every American invasion, every toppling of a government, every assassination, every act of terrorism.
And the principle of government by the people, for the people, of the people, that is that's just silly.
This is Santiago, the capital of Chile. In 1973, the National Stadium was turned into a concentration camp as a military coup, backed by the United States, overthrew the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende. The leader of the coup was a fascist, General Augusto Pinochet, who rounded up Allende's supporters and brought them here. A young medical student, Roberto Navarrete, was one of them. These changing rooms were used as what when you were imprisoned here?
They were used as places where people were kept inside here, 50 or more. You can see that there was actually no room to move around here. Even all these places were full of people sleeping here, and there were no blankets or anything. Even some people actually slept here. There was very little room.
When they started to torture you all,
yeah.
What did they do to you then?
The techniques they used were beating you, especially in sort of places where it could become very painful, with a rubber truncheon, and especially the genitals and the soles of the feet, and the arms and various places.
Over 2,000 people were confined here, many of them never to be seen again. Victor Jara was Chile's greatest balladeer. His songs had celebrated the popular democracy of the government of Salvador Allende. He was taken to the stadium, where he was a source of strength for his fellow prisoners, singing for them until soldiers beat him to the ground and smashed his hands. In his last poem, smuggled out of the stadium, he wrote, "What horror the face of fascism creates. They carry out their plans with knife-like precision. For them, blood equals medals. How hard it is to sing when I must sing of horror, in which silence and screams are the end of my song." After 2 days, they killed him.
How old were you?
I was 18.
18?
Yeah.
Oh. Does the fear that you experienced then, is that something that imprints itself on the rest of your life?
Yes, but we felt it was part of what we were trying to build in this country.
What they were trying to build was a just, equitable democracy that took control of Chile's economy from the United States and its proxies. For the invisible people of Latin America, Chile under Allende became an inspiration. In Washington, President Nixon secretly plotted to destroy the Chilean economy. "We're going to make the economy scream," said Nixon. In Santiago, General Pinochet, America's man, sent in his British-made bombers against the presidential palace. It was September the 11th, 1973. From inside the palace, Allende refused to leave, true to his promise not to surrender the government for which the ordinary people of Chile had voted. He broadcast this last message, then he shot himself.
Trabajadores de mi patria, tengo fe en Chile y su destino. Sigan ustedes sabiendo que mucho más temprano que tarde, de nuevo abrirán las grandes alamedas por donde pase el hombre libre para construir una sociedad mejor. ¡Viva Chile! ¡Viva el pueblo! ¡Vivan los trabajadores!
With General Pinochet in power, Washington again denied it had destroyed another democracy.
We had no contact with any of the people that carried out the military coup, and therefore the coup that overthrew Allende was done without contact with the United States.
A very different story is told by these secret documents. In October 1970, the CIA cabled its man in Chile. It is firm and continuing policy that Allende be overthrown by a coup. When that happened 3 years later, a US official cabled back to Washington. Chile's coup d'etat was close to perfect.